always prided itself on being the soundtrack of real life: truth, heartbreak, resilience, family, faith, and the kind of honesty you can feel down to the bone. Yet behind that proud tradition, behind the steel guitars and Sunday morning sincerity, many artists lived with a truth they were never allowed to share. In Nashville, image wasn't just important, it was everything. And for generations, the fear of losing a career, a reputation, even a place in the community kept countless musicians silent. Some carried that silence for decades. Some nearly broke under the weight of it. Others risked everything they had: fame, fans, and the future they worked their whole lives to build, just to finally breathe as themselves. Over the years, whispers followed them, rumors blurred with reality, and the pressure of hiding shaped their lives in ways most listeners never knew. But eventually, one by one, these artists stepped into the light. And when they did, they didn't just tell the world who they were. They helped change the rules of country music forever. This is the powerful, complicated, and long-ignored story of 20 country artists who were secretly gay, and how their courage reshaped an entire genre. Number 20, Shelly Wright 90s. Shelly Wright seemed to embody everything Nashville adored. She had the smile, the voice, the stage presence, and a string of chart-topping songs that painted her as the girl next door of country music. Warm, relatable, effortlessly charming. But while she shined beneath the spotlights, an entirely different battle was consuming her life behind closed doors. Shelly lived in constant fear. Fear that one wrong step, one whispered rumor, or one accidental glimpse into her private world would destroy everything she had worked for since childhood. She maintained a double life: the public image of a rising star adored by fans, and the secret existence of a woman deeply terrified of being outed. During her ascent to fame, she dated men publicly to maintain the illusion, even while being in long-term relationships with women, silently carrying the guilt, confusion, and emotional exhaustion that came with it. In later interviews, she confessed to praying desperately for God to fix her, believing she could not be both Christian and gay in the conservative heart of country music. The emotional pressure became so overwhelming that at one point she nearly lost her will to live, proof of how isolating that silence truly was. Everything changed in 2010. With a courage that shook Nashville, Shelly Wright became the first major commercial country star to publicly come out, and the reaction was swift. Radio stations pulled her songs. Industry colleagues distanced themselves. Invitations disappeared. She paid a price few artists would ever dare to risk. But what she gained was far more powerful: freedom, identity, and a place in music history. Her decision became a turning point, proof that authenticity could bloom even in the most guarded corners of Nashville. Her bravery opened the door for countless others who were still hiding, showing them that survival and truth mattered more than any chart position. Shelly Wright didn't just change her own life, she quietly shifted the future of country music. Number 19, Ty Herndon. Herndon wasn't just another country singer. He was one of Nashville's golden boys. His debut single shot straight to number one, his smooth vocals dominated radio, and his image fit perfectly into the polished, tradition-loving world of mainstream country music. Fans heard him sing heartfelt love songs about women, never suspecting the truth he was quietly fighting to protect. Behind the cameras and tour buses, Ty lived in a state of constant conflict: fame, faith, identity, three forces that pulled him in opposite directions. In a genre deeply rooted in conservative values, he felt he had no room to breathe, no safe place to be himself. And as the years passed, the pressure hardened into a lifelong burden. Rumors followed him, especially after a scandalous arrest in the mid-90s that sparked widespread speculation. But even then, Ty stayed silent, believing that acknowledging his truth would cost him everything: his fans, his career, and the world he had clawed his way into. Then in 2014, after decades of secrets and emotional strain, Ty Herndon made a choice that changed the trajectory of his life forever. Sitting down for a deeply personal interview, he finally spoke the words he had feared since he was a young man. He is a proud gay man. It was a confession that rippled through Nashville, an industry where artists had been encouraged to hide pieces of themselves for generations. But what followed was remarkable. Instead of rejection, Ty felt something he hadn't felt in years: relief. He described it as finally being able to breathe. And perhaps even more powerfully, many of his fans didn't turn away. They came closer. Messages of support flooded in. Listeners told him his courage meant more than any song could ever express. Ty's story proved something essential about country music. Its heart isn't defined by who you love, but by how deeply you feel it. By stepping into the light, he didn't just free himself. He inspired a new generation of artists who had been taught to hide, reminding them that truth doesn't destroy a legacy. Number 18, Billy Gilman, E to Fame, was the kind that only happens once in a generation. At just 11 years old, he stunned the country world with one voice, becoming the youngest artist ever to break into the Billboard Country Top 40. With his crystal-clear vocals, polished image, and boy-next-door charm, Nashville promoted him as the perfect American child star, pure, innocent, and destined for greatness. But behind that carefully crafted image, Billy carried a truth he felt he could never speak out loud. As he grew older, his voice changed, his career shifted, and the pressure of living up to an idealized version of himself became suffocating. Nashville didn't know what to do with a former child prodigy whose identity, both musical and personal, no longer fit the narrow mold the industry had built around him. For years, Billy stayed silent. He feared that revealing who he truly was would close every door he had left. The fear wasn't irrational. The country music world had a long history of punishing those who didn't conform to its expectations. Billy had already experienced the fragility of fame once, and he wasn't sure he could survive losing it again. Everything changed in 2014. After seeing Ty Herndon publicly come out with courage and clarity, Billy felt something he hadn't felt in years. Permission. Permission to stop hiding. Permission to breathe. He posted a candid video on YouTube, speaking directly from the heart as he revealed that he is gay. He talked openly about the fear of rejection, the weight of secrecy, and the exhaustion of trying to be someone he wasn't. The reaction shocked him, not in cruelty, but in kindness. Fans who had grown up alongside him rallied with overwhelming support. They didn't see a scandal. They saw a human being who had finally found the strength to stop pretending. Coming out didn't resurrect his country career in the traditional sense, but it gave him something far more valuable: authenticity. He shifted toward pop and contemporary music, letting his artistry evolve naturally instead of forcing it into a box designed years earlier for a child. Billy Gilman's story is a reminder that behind the bright lights and rhinestones are real people, some still struggling to make peace with themselves. His courage didn't just free his voice. Number 17, TJ Osborne stood boldly in front of sold-out crowds as one half of the award-winning duo Brothers Osborne, delivering hits like Stay a Little Longer with a voice that felt rugged, soulful, and unmistakably country. Fans saw a confident performer, a charismatic frontman, and a rising star who seemed to embody everything Nashville celebrated. What they didn't see was the truth he carried quietly every time he stepped off stage. Behind the fame, TJ battled a fear older than his career, a fear shared by many artists before him. The fear that if he ever revealed who he truly was, everything he built could collapse overnight. Country music, with all its beauty and tradition, had long been a place where silence was expected, and authenticity was a risk few dared to take. For years, TJ lived that duality. On stage, he was powerful and free. Off stage, he carried a weight that refused to lighten. He later admitted he'd spent countless nights wondering if honesty would make fans stop listening, if labels would retreat, or if Nashville would quietly shut him out. In 2021, everything changed. In an emotional and widely praised interview with Time magazine, TJ Osborne publicly came out as gay, making him the first openly gay man signed to a major country label. It wasn't just an announcement. It was a historic moment, the culmination of years of internal struggle and the beginning of a new era for country music. The impact was immediate. Instead of rejection, TJ felt supported. The country community, artists, fans, journalists, even industry veterans, rallied around him. It was a shift that would have been unthinkable in earlier decades. At the CMA Awards later that year, TJ performed his song Younger Me, a powerful letter to his childhood self filled with compassion, regret, and hard-won pride. When he finished, the audience rose to their feet in a long, emotional standing ovation. That moment wasn't just about applause. It was about evolution. the evolution of a genre, an industry, and a conversation that had been forced into silence for far too long. T.J. Osborne's journey isn't simply a personal victory. It is a milestone, a symbol of how country music can grow, heal, and finally make room for every kind of love. Number 16, Kristen Hall. Sugarland exploded onto the country music scene with a fresh, catchy, irresistibly energetic sound. Fans saw Jennifer Nettles belting out anthems and watched the group climb the charts with remarkable speed. But before the spotlight, before the awards, before Sugarland became a household name, there was another essential force behind the band's creation: Kristen Hall. Kristen wasn't just a background member. She co-founded Sugarland, co-wrote many of their earliest songs, and helped shape the artistic identity that would eventually carry the group to mainstream success. Her songwriting was sharp, emotional, and deeply human. Her guitar work and creative direction built much of the framework Sugarland would later rely on. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, she was gone. In 2006, Sugarland announced that Kristen Hall was leaving the group to focus on songwriting. It was an explanation that sounded neat, simple, and easy to accept. But anyone familiar with Nashville knew there was far more brewing beneath the surface. Behind the scenes, quiet whispers began to spread through the industry, speculation that Kristen hadn't left voluntarily, and that her departure had as much to do with image as it did with music. In a genre obsessed with presentation, Hall didn't fit Nashville's traditional expectations of femininity. And although she wasn't publicly outspoken about her sexuality at the time, those within the industry were aware that she was openly gay in her private life. For a rising mainstream country act still shaping its identity, this was seen as a risk by the gatekeepers who controlled radio, marketing, and branding. Whether these pressures directly pushed her out is something Kristen has never publicly detailed, but the timing and the silence spoke volumes. While Sugarland skyrocketed to even greater fame as a duo, Kristen Hall stepped back from the spotlight entirely. She continued doing what she always did best: writing, creating, and contributing from behind the scenes, far from cameras and expectations. Years later, as country music began to reckon with its long history of exclusion, fans revisited her story with new eyes. They recognized the quiet courage it took to be a queer woman working inside a genre that often left little room for difference. Her early contributions became even more meaningful, proof of how pivotal she had been, despite the lack of recognition. Kristen Hall never needed fame to validate her artistry. Her influence is still woven into Sugarland's origins, a reminder that sometimes the people who help build a legacy aren't the ones standing in the spotlight. Number 15. Maren Morris, always been something of an outlier in country music. A firebrand wrapped in fierce talent, refusing to mold herself to the expectations of an industry built on convention. From the moment she burst onto the scene with My Church, fans recognized a voice that was bold, unconventional, and unwilling to stay quiet. She pushed boundaries with her lyrics, her style, and her outspoken views on gender inequality and inclusivity. Yet even with all her confidence and defiant honesty, Maren carried a truth she wasn't ready to share with the world. Throughout much of her career, she quietly navigated her identity, choosing privacy over openness, survival over risk. In the highly traditional, politically charged environment of Nashville, even someone as fearless as Maren Morris understood the consequences of stepping outside the lines. For years, she became one of the few mainstream country artists willing to defend LGBTQ+ people publicly, often speaking up when others stayed silent. She called out hypocrisy, challenged industry norms, and demanded better representation. But even as she fought for others, she kept her own story guarded. That changed in 2024 when Maren revealed that she was interested in both men and women. The announcement didn't come as a scandal or a shock tactic. It came as a quiet, steady truth, a truth she had carried for years while trying to find her place in a genre where being different often meant being isolated. She explained that part of her struggle was tied to the constant pressure of trying to fit in, with a Nashville system that never fully embraced her. In the months leading up to her public revelation, Maren took a major step away from the corporate side of country music, openly stating she was done bending herself to please an industry that resisted change. Coming out wasn't just a personal statement. It was a final declaration of independence. an act of reclaiming her story, her identity, and her freedom. The reaction was overwhelmingly supportive. Fans praised her honesty. Many, especially younger listeners, said they saw themselves reflected in her courage. For them, she wasn't just a singer. They saw a leader who stood her ground in a world that often demanded silence. Maren Morris's journey is a reminder of how the country genre is evolving, slowly but steadily. She didn't break down the doors with anger or rebellion. She simply spoke her truth with the same clarity and conviction that had always defined her music. And in doing so, she proved that authenticity doesn't weaken an artist, it strengthens them. Number 14, Shane McAnally. McAnally became one of the most influential songwriters in modern country music. He was just another young artist in the 1990s chasing a dream in Nashville. He had everything the industry claimed to want: the look, the voice, the talent, and the hunger to make it. But behind that hopeful exterior, he was carrying a secret that felt too dangerous to reveal. Shane was a gay man trying to build a career in a world where even the faintest hint of queerness could end a record deal before it began. In the Nashville of that era, image was as tightly controlled as the music itself. Anything that didn't fit the clean-cut conservative picture was quietly pushed out of view. So Shane did what many before him had been forced to do. He hid. He kept his personal life tucked far away from his public persona, to the point where even close friends knew little about the truth he lived with every day. The secrecy took a toll. The pressure to suppress who he was became heavier with each passing year, and eventually he reached a breaking point. Feeling suffocated by expectations and the constant demand to pretend, Shane left Nashville altogether. He moved to Los Angeles, far from the judgment and quiet scrutiny of Music Row. There, away from the rules he had grown up trying to obey, Shane finally began rebuilding his life on his own terms. Slowly, he reclaimed his confidence. Not just as an artist, but as a gay man, no longer willing to shrink himself for the comfort of others. When he returned to Nashville years later, it wasn't as the young performer trying to fit into someone else's vision. It was as a songwriter with a sharpened voice, a clearer purpose, and a refusal to hide any longer. And suddenly, the town that once felt too small for him couldn't get enough of his talent. Shane went on to craft massive hits for Casey Musgraves, Kenny Chesney, Sam Hunt, and many more. By then, he was openly gay, no disclaimers, no apologies, no fear. And without preaching or turning his identity into a headline, he quietly challenged the old rules of country music simply by thriving within them. Shane McAnally never needed to declare himself a trailblazer. His work spoke loudly enough. His success proved that authenticity and artistry could coexist, even in a genre that had long resisted change. And in the process, he became one of Nashville's most respected creative forces, a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is return to the place that once made you feel small, and this time, take up all the space you deserve. Number 13. Orville Peck first appeared on the country music horizon. He looked like someone who had stepped straight out of a myth. Part cowboy drifter, part shadowy poet, part wandering spirit, stitched together with fringe leather and mystery. His mask, his deep voice, his haunting stage presence, none of it fit neatly into Nashville's traditional categories. And that was exactly why he captivated audiences everywhere he went. While many country artists spent their careers trying to blend in, Orville did the opposite. He embraced everything that made him unconventional. But behind the theatrical exterior lies a voice so rich, so soulful, so steeped in classic country influences that even the most traditional listeners couldn't deny his authenticity. Heartache, loneliness, longing, the endless search for belonging, these timeless themes ran through his music as clearly as any cowboy ballad ever had. Unlike many queer artists before him, Orville Peck never hid who he was. He is openly gay, and he stepped into the industry without disguising that truth. But what made his story different is that he never allowed sexuality to be the center of his artistry. He didn't brand himself as a gay country singer. He simply sang from the soul, letting emotion, not labels, define him. His albums, Pony and Bronco, carried a strange and beautiful duality, fierce and tender, rugged and vulnerable, nostalgic yet boldly modern. The mask he wears became a symbol not of secrecy, but of sovereignty. His way of controlling his narrative in a world that often insists on taking ownership of artists' identities. It allowed him to reveal only what he chose, when he chose, without sacrificing depth or connection. Critics praised him for reinventing the idea of a country star while honoring its roots. Fans appreciated his courage to look different, sound different, and love without pretense. He attracted listeners far outside the traditional country base, showing that the genre's emotional core, its longing, its hope, its heartbreak, is universally understood. In an industry built on carefully curated images, Orville Peck proved something profound. You don't need to blend in to belong. Your authenticity, even when wrapped in fringe and mystery, can cut deeper than any stereotype ever could. His rise isn't just a career success story, it's a quiet revolution. A reminder that country music has always been bigger, stranger, and more beautiful than the limits people try to impose on it. Brandi Carlile set out to be a rule breaker, an icon, or a symbol of change. All she ever wanted was to sing, honestly, fearlessly, and from the deepest parts of her heart. Growing up in a small town in Washington, she fell in love early with the storytelling tradition of country and Americana music. She didn't just listen to songs, she lived inside them. They shaped her sense of self, her understanding of the world, and her desire to create something real. But when she entered the music industry, she quickly realized that her truth didn't fit neatly into Nashville's narrow blueprint for a female artist. Brandi came out as gay in her early 20s, long before the industry had shown any openness toward queer artists. It wasn't a dramatic announcement or a strategic moment. It was simply her refusing to hide who she was. But even that quiet honesty came with consequences. Many executives didn't know what to do with her. She didn't match the image, the style, or the expectations that dominated commercial country music. So Brandi Carlile did something extraordinary. She stopped trying to fit in and started carving out her own path. She built her career from the ground up, writing songs with a kind of raw clarity that made listeners feel seen. She never disguised her perspective or softened her truth. Instead, her music leaned into vulnerability, love, loss, redemption, forgiveness, the emotions that define the best of American roots music. With each album, her voice grew stronger, more confident, and more unmistakably her own. In 2018, everything crystallized with By the Way, I Forgive You, an album that wasn't just critically acclaimed, it became a turning point. It earned her multiple Grammy Awards and cemented her as one of the most powerful and authentic voices of her generation. The industry that once didn't know what to do with her now couldn't ignore her. Then came the Highwomen, the all-female supergroup Brandi helped create to challenge the gender imbalance in country and Americana music. It was a bold move and a deeply necessary one, a reminder that the genre's emotional depth has always been shaped by women whose stories deserved a louder stage. Brandi Carlile never tried to be a pioneer. She simply stood by her truth, and in doing so, she changed the landscape around her. Her career is proof that real music doesn't ask for permission. A global icon with one of the most distinctive voices in modern music, K.D. Lang was a small-town Canadian singer chasing a dream built on classic country tradition. She adored Patsy Cline, studied the emotional architecture of old-school country vocals, and carried into Nashville a sound so pure and striking that people couldn't help but notice her. From the beginning, she radiated a uniqueness that fascinated some and unsettled others. Even as her fame grew throughout the 1980s, K.D. Lang didn't fit the conventional image of a female country star. She dressed androgynously, eschewed glamour, and refused to conform to the sparkling, soft-focus femininity Nashville liked to package and sell. She kept her personal life private, not out of shame, but because she understood the risks of honesty in an industry still resistant to difference. Then, in 1992, she did something almost unthinkable for the time. She publicly came out as gay in an interview with The Advocate. Country music was far less open then than it is today. The reaction was immediate and harsh. Some radio stations stopped playing her music. Certain industry insiders distanced themselves quietly. For a moment, it seemed like her blossoming country career might be cut short simply because she told the truth. But K.D. Lang didn't waver. She stood firmly in who she was, calm, confident, unapologetic. And instead of shrinking, she evolved. If Nashville wanted to pull away from her, she would simply walk forward on her own path. Her music gradually expanded into pop, jazz, and adult contemporary, leading to multiple Grammy Awards and worldwide acclaim. Her voice, elastic and breathtaking, proved impossible to confine to any single genre. Though she drifted from the commercial country spotlight, her roots in the genre remained undeniable. And in hindsight, she became one of the earliest artists to challenge Nashville's traditions without bitterness. She didn't try to tear down the walls. She simply outgrew them. She refused to mask her identity or shape herself into something more palatable, choosing instead to let her talent speak louder than the industry's prejudices. Today, k.d. lang stands as a reminder that authenticity sometimes means leaving certain spaces behind and finding success on your own terms. Her legacy isn't defined by the backlash she endured, but by the grace, strength, and quiet power with which she outlasted it. She didn't just break barriers. Hob number 10. Patrick Haggerty. LLE was ready for any open conversation about sexuality, long before the industry showed even a hint of acceptance. Patrick Haggerty was quietly making history. In 1973, at a time when country music was dominated by conservative values and strictly limited narratives, he stepped forward as the frontman of Lavender Country, a small Seattle-based band whose existence alone was revolutionary. Their self-titled album, Lavender Country, wasn't just music, it was a declaration. Raw, political, deeply personal, and years ahead of its time, the record explored themes of love, isolation, discrimination, and the emotional cost of living authentically in a world that refused to acknowledge your existence. It was the first openly gay country album ever released, a milestone that came and went quietly, without fanfare or mainstream recognition, because the industry simply wasn't ready. The album was banned from country radio. Major stores refused to stock it. Most listeners never heard of Patrick Haggerty or Lavender Country. But the music was never meant for mass approval. It was meant for truth, for capturing what life felt like for gay people trying to survive in a hostile world. The songs spoke to loneliness, yearning, resilience, and the fragile hope that someday someone would understand. For decades, the album faded into obscurity, living only in the memories of a small LGBTQ+ community that saw in it a rare reflection of themselves. Patrick didn't chase mainstream fame. He built a life rooted in activism, community organizing, and authentic storytelling. His legacy quietly grew in the shadows, even if the broader world didn't yet recognize it. Then, in the 2010s, the internet brought Lavender Country back into the light. Suddenly, a new generation discovered the album and realized what it truly was, a pioneering document of queer identity in a genre long resistant to change. Patrick Haggerty, now decades older, returned to the stage, not as a cautionary relic, but as a hero. Young audiences embraced him not as someone who defied tradition, but as someone who expanded it. His music became a testament to the fact that rebellion in country music doesn't always look like drinking, fighting, or breaking bar rules. Sometimes, the boldest rebels are the ones who tell the truth, even when no one wants to hear it. Patrick Haggerty didn't just release an album. He created a blueprint for every LGBTQ+ country artist who would come after him. Katie Pruitt up in a deeply conservative household in Georgia, where faith, tradition, and the expectations of small-town life shaped nearly every part of her upbringing. From a young age, she found comfort in music, especially country and folk, genres built on storytelling, vulnerability, and all the messy humanity that comes with them. She dreamed of becoming a songwriter, of one day crafting stories that connected with people the way her favorite songs connected with her. But as she entered adulthood, Katie began facing a truth that would reshape her entire life. She realized she was gay, something she had been taught, implicitly and explicitly, to hide, fear, or deny. The conflict between the faith she was raised with and the identity she was growing into became overwhelming. For years, she lived in a painful space between who she was and who she believed she was supposed to be. Instead of running from the tension, Katie eventually turned toward it. And from that struggle came some of the most honest songwriting of her generation. Her debut album, Expectations, became her breakthrough, a bold and beautifully vulnerable record that refused to smooth out the sharp edges of her experience. She didn't hide her identity behind metaphors or coded language. She wrote openly about her journey. The guilt, the confusion, the anger, the hope, and the ultimate liberation of embracing her truth. Songs like Loving Her, and Grace Has a Gun captured the raw emotional storm of learning to love yourself, even when the world you grew up in tells you it's wrong. Critics praised the album for its lyrical bravery and its emotional clarity, often comparing Katie's depth to early Brandi Carlile or Jason Isbell, artists known for excavating hard truths with stunning honesty. What makes Katie Pruitt's story so powerful is that she never sought to be a spokesperson or a symbol. Her music doesn't preach. It invites. It opens a door into her life and allows listeners to step inside, to feel the tension between faith and self-acceptance, to understand the heartbreak of hiding, and to celebrate the freedom of honesty. For Katie, coming out wasn't a political gesture or a marketing move. It was survival. It was finally choosing to live. And through her art, she has given countless listeners, queer, questioning, or simply human, the courage to question what they've been taught and embrace who they really are. Brandy Clark ever been the loudest figure in country music. She doesn't chase headlines, scandal, or spectacle. Instead, she's built her career the old-fashioned way, through meticulous storytelling, quiet determination, and a deep understanding of the people whose lives she writes about. Raised in a small logging town in Washington state, Brandy grew up surrounded by the struggles and triumphs of everyday Americans, the kinds of people whose stories often go unnoticed. That world shaped her artistry long before Nashville ever knew her name. When she finally made her way to Music City, Brandy didn't begin as a performer. She started behind the scenes, writing songs that would become massive hits for Miranda Lambert, Casey Musgraves, and the band Perry. Her writing stood out because it wasn't polished to perfection. It was real, honest, human. She wrote about small-town heartbreak, bad decisions, broken dreams, and the quiet resilience that holds people together. Listeners felt those songs because they recognized themselves in them. As Brandy stepped into the spotlight to record her own material, it became clear she had something rare, a voice that wasn't just musical, but deeply empathetic. She had a way of capturing emotional truths most artists shy away from. Her albums, full of wit, sorrow, irony, and tenderness, proved she wasn't just a songwriter. She was a storyteller of the highest order. Brandy Clark is openly gay, a fact she has never weaponized or turned into a marketing angle. That's not her style. She never tried to shock anyone, nor did she hide who she was. She simply lived openly while letting her craft speak for itself. Still, her presence in Nashville wasn't always met with straightforward acceptance. As a queer woman in a genre that historically resisted LGBTQ+ voices, she encountered quiet barriers, doors that didn't open as easily, rooms that didn't feel fully welcoming. But none of it stopped her. If anything, it sharpened her focus. Multiple Grammy nominations followed, along with widespread respect from critics, fellow musicians, and fans who admired her refusal to compromise her truth or her artistry. Brandy didn't blaze into the spotlight like a firework. She glowed steadily, consistently, unshakably, proving that authenticity has its own power, one that doesn't rely on noise or controversy. Her career stands as a reminder that country music's foundation has always been storytelling. And storytelling, at its core, demands honesty. Through her quiet confidence, Brandy Clark helped widen the borders of the genre, showing that great country songs don't care about labels. They care about life, love, and truth, and she has always given the genre all three. Brooke Eden ever shared her truth publicly. She had already built a reputation in Nashville as a rising powerhouse. Her voice was big, bold, and unmistakably country, rich enough to silence a noisy bar, and confident enough to make industry insiders believe she was on the brink of stardom. Her songs carried the energy of someone destined to break through, and her stage presence radiated the kind of fire only true performers possess. But behind the spotlights and the promise of success, Brooke was carrying a secret that felt increasingly impossible to live with. For years, she was in a committed relationship with a woman, Hillary Hoover, a radio promoter also working within the industry. Their love was steady, real, and grounding. Yet Brooke felt she couldn't speak about it, not even casually, without risking everything her career had been built upon. The silence wasn't just uncomfortable, it was suffocating. Nashville's traditional culture made authenticity a gamble, and Brooke Eden understood the stakes. She lived in two worlds. The one the public saw, full of high-energy performances and bright optimism, and the private one, where she had to edit every sentence, every photo, every interview to protect the life she treasured. But eventually, the emotional cost became too heavy to bear. Hiding the most important person in her life wasn't just painful, it was soul-crushing. And Brooke realized that if she wanted a long career, she couldn't spend it pretending. In 2021, she chose honesty. Brooke publicly revealed her relationship and engagement to Hillary, sharing their love story openly for the first time. It wasn't a dramatic announcement or a carefully crafted PR moment. It was tender, simple, and beautifully human. A woman finally stepping into the light with the person she loved. What happened next surprised even her. The industry didn't punish her. Fans didn't abandon her. Instead, support poured in. Country radio, which had long been hesitant with queer representation, welcomed her new music. Fellow artists celebrated her courage, and audiences embraced her authenticity, often saying that seeing Brooke live honestly helped them feel brave enough to do the same. Brooke Eden didn't set out to challenge Nashville's norms or rewrite its rules. She didn't try to become an activist or a symbol. She simply stopped hiding. And in doing so, she became a powerful reminder that the country genre is changing, not through loud revolutions, but through artists who quietly, courageously choose to live in truth. Amythyst Kiah never looked or sounded like the stereotypical image of a country artist. And that's precisely what makes her so extraordinary. Born and raised in Tennessee, she grew up surrounded by the sounds that shaped the American South. Gospel choirs, old-time Appalachian music, bluegrass gatherings, and the soulful traditions passed down through generations. These influences didn't just inspire her, they anchored her identity. But as a Black queer woman navigating spaces that weren't built with her in mind, Amythyst often felt like an outsider in the very musical traditions she loved. From early on, music became her refuge, a place where she could work through the tension between heritage and identity. Her voice, raw, resonant, and commanding, carried a depth that stopped audiences in their tracks. She wasn't trying to conform to Nashville's rules. She was trying to reclaim the parts of the genre that had always belonged to people like her, even if history had tried to erase them. Her first major breakthrough came with the song Black Myself, originally recorded with the powerful roots collective Our Native Daughters. The track was unapologetically honest, confronting the racial realities of America with a mix of pain, resilience, and unwavering clarity. It resonated deeply. The song earned her a Grammy nomination, and suddenly the world began to see what her longtime fans already knew. Amythyst Kiah was one of the most fearless voices in modern Americana and country-rooted music. But behind the acclaim was a personal journey marked by isolation and self-doubt. As she navigated her identity, racially, musically, and sexually, Amythyst struggled with feelings of not belonging anywhere. She wasn't traditional enough for mainstream country, not commercial enough for pop, and not willing to flatten her identity to fit neatly into any box. Instead of shrinking, she channeled that struggle into her art. Her work explores the quest for belonging and the ache of loss, and the fragile process of self-acceptance. Whether singing about personal grief or generations of resilience, her music carries a weight that is both intimate and universal. She represents a new kind of country-rooted artist, one who honors the genre's foundational storytelling while refusing to ignore the complexities of modern identity. Amythyst Kiah never set out to tear down country music's traditions. She simply revealed the parts of those traditions that had always been there, overlooked, unacknowledged, but essential. She doesn't redefine country from the outside. She reminds listeners that its roots have always been far more diverse than history likes to admit. Jesse Dilda T. Ye a mainstream name, but within the Americana and alt-country world, their rise has been impossible to ignore. Their voice, gentle, warm, and quietly commanding, carries the emotional weight of someone who has lived a life full of contradictions. Rooted in the folk and gospel traditions of the American South, Jesse's music feels both grounded in history and boldly contemporary. It reflects a soul constantly searching for truth, harmony, and a sense of belonging in a world that doesn't always make space for difference. Raised in a deeply religious environment, Jesse found early refuge in music. Church choirs, piano hymns, and moments of stillness between notes became the foundation of their relationship with sound. But as they began to understand themselves as queer and non-binary, that same environment, once so comforting, grew complicated. The place that had taught them faith was also the place where they learned to doubt themselves. That tension shaped their artistic voice long before anyone heard their name on a record. Instead of turning away from the pain, Jessie absorbed it, wrestled with it, and eventually transformed it into art. Their 2023 album, Landscapes, became a breakout moment. Critics praised its vulnerability, its poetic introspection, and its ability to merge spiritual longing with emotional clarity. Reviewers compared Jessie's lyrical depth to early Brandi Carlile or Jason Isbell, artists known for weaving emotional truth into every line. But what makes Jessie Dilda remarkable isn't just their songwriting. It's their refusal to simplify themselves. They do not present queerness as a statement or a rebellion. They present it as a lived experience, tender, messy, uncertain, and profoundly human. Their music doesn't shout, it invites. It opens a quiet door and asks listeners to sit with the contradictions that define real life: belief and doubt, fear and courage, longing and acceptance. Jessie isn't trying to disrupt country music. They're trying to broaden its emotional vocabulary. Their presence is a powerful reminder that country-inspired music, roots, folk, Americana, has always been big enough to hold multitudes. And for listeners who have spent years feeling unseen, Jessie Dilda's gentle honesty feels like a hand reaching back through the darkness. They aren't simply an emerging artist. They are a sign of where the genre's heart is heading. Cameron Hawthorne didn't burst onto the scene with fanfare or shock value. He arrived with something much rarer: quiet sincerity. His voice carried the warmth of classic country, evoking the spirit of George Strait and Vince Gill, while his songwriting wove together heartfelt simplicity and emotional truth. From the start, Cameron felt like a natural fit for country music's storied history of storytelling. But the moment that truly set him apart wasn't a hit single or a flashy performance. It was a music video. In 2019, Cameron released Dancing in the Living Room, a tender, understated song about love in its most intimate form. The video featured real couples dancing together in the quiet comfort of their homes. It wasn't polished or dramatic. It was soft, genuine, and profoundly human. And then came the moment that broke one of Nashville's unspoken rules. The video ended with Cameron himself dancing with his boyfriend. There were no speeches, no declarations, no attempts to shock, just a simple, honest portrayal of love, the kind country fans had celebrated for decades, only now expanded to include a couple they weren't used to seeing on screen. It was a milestone not because it tried to provoke, but because it didn't. Cameron's approach was radical in its normalcy. By showing love without hiding or apologizing, he did something country music had quietly resisted for generations. He made queer romance visible without turning it into spectacle. The video went viral, attracting praise for its beauty, elegance, and emotional purity. Fans responded not with anger, but with support. Many thanked him for creating a moment that felt real, hopeful, and long overdue. From that point on, Cameron Hawthorne continued building a loyal fan base. People drawn not only to his smooth classic sound, but to his authenticity. Instead of distancing himself from country music's roots, he embraced them. He showed that being true to yourself doesn't mean turning your back on tradition. It simply means expanding tradition to make room for more stories. Cameron never set out to rewrite the rules of country music. He just wanted to dance with the person he loved. And in doing so, he created a moment that changed the genre in a quiet, unforgettable way. Now, number 3, Waylon Payne practically born into country music royalty. His mother, Sammy Smith, gave the world the iconic "Help Me Make It Through the Night," and his father, Jody Payne, played guitar for Willie Nelson. Music wasn't just part of Waylon's childhood, it was the air he breathed. With a lineage like that, many assumed his path would be straightforward, perhaps even charmed. But his journey through country music would prove to be anything but. Named after his godfather, Waylon Jennings, Payne inherited the outlaw spirit long before he ever stepped on stage. He had the talent, the voice, and the emotional depth of someone destined to carve out a meaningful place in the genre. Yet behind the scenes, he was fighting battles far heavier than the industry ever knew. His early life was turbulent, marked by addiction, personal struggles, and the painful process of coming to terms with his sexuality in a world that wasn't ready to accept him. The same genre built on stories of heartbreak and redemption seemed unwilling to acknowledge the kind of struggle Waylon was actually living through. And like many queer artists before him, the fear of being rejected by the country world left him isolated and adrift. For years, Waylon Payne disappeared from the spotlight. It wasn't failure, it was survival. He stepped away, grappling with addiction and identity in a deeply personal, often agonizing journey. But when he finally returned, it wasn't quiet. It was transformative. In 2020, Waylon released Blue Eyes, The Harlot, The Queer, The Pusher and Me, an album that instantly established itself as one of the most emotionally raw and courageous works in modern country music. The title alone announced his refusal to hide any longer. The songs were a confession, a reckoning, and a resurrection all at once, telling stories of heartbreak, trauma, forgiveness, and redemption with a brutal honesty rarely heard in Nashville. Critics hailed the album as a masterpiece, calling it one of the most powerful country records of the decade. It wasn't just music. It was a declaration of identity from someone who had survived the kind of darkness many never escape. Payne wasn't asking for acceptance. He was telling his truth, unapologetically. Today, Waylon Payne is seen as one of Nashville's most compelling storytellers. His life and music blend the grit of classic outlaw country with the vulnerability of someone who has clawed their way back to the light. His journey isn't about rebellion for attention or shock value. It's about survival. It's about redemption. It's about reclaiming a life nearly lost. Waylon Payne stands as living proof of what country music has always been at its core. The sound of broken people finding their way home. Have number 2, Shelly Fairchild's story is one of talent, tenacity, and quiet resilience. When she burst onto the Nashville scene in the mid-2000s with her debut album Ride, critics praised her powerful vocals, her soulful delivery, and her ability to channel raw emotion into every song she sang. She seemed perfectly poised for stardom, one of those rare artists whose voice alone could stop time and demand attention. But beneath the promising rise lay pressures the public never saw. Nashville, especially during that era, held rigid expectations for women, how they should dress, look, act, and even who they should love. Shelly felt the full force of that pressure. She later revealed that she was gay, but had spent years hiding it, terrified that honesty could derail her career before it ever had a chance to bloom. The stress of maintaining that facade took a toll. Combined with the unforgiving politics of the music industry and record label struggles, her momentum slowed. It wasn't because she lacked talent. If anything, she had more of it than most. But the machine of Nashville didn't always know what to do with an artist who didn't fit neatly into its outdated parameters. So Shelly stepped back, not to surrender, but to rebuild. Away from the spotlight, she began rediscovering herself, not just as a musician, but as a person. She slowly started living more openly, surrounding herself with people who didn't just accept her truth, but celebrated it. And when she finally returned, she did it with a voice stronger and more grounded than ever. Her 2017 album Buffalo was a turning point. It wasn't made to chase radio hits or chart placement. It was made with heart, intention, and honesty. The songs were introspective, exploring love, loss, longing, and the profound experience of finally accepting yourself. Every note sounded like someone who had fought hard to reclaim her art and her identity. But perhaps Shelly's most lasting impact isn't just her music. It's her role as a mentor and advocate. As Nashville slowly began to acknowledge the LGBTQ+ community, Shelly became a guiding presence for younger queer artists navigating the same fears she once faced alone. She offered support, wisdom, and proof that a career could survive and even thrive when built on authenticity rather than secrecy. Today, Shelly Fairchild is not chasing fame. She is building a legacy rooted in courage, truth, and artistic integrity. She didn't just find her voice again. She reclaimed it, reshaped it, and made it stronger. And in doing so, she reminded Nashville of something it had forgotten. The best country music isn't about perfection. Look like a modern outlaw with her tattoos, leather jackets, and smoky-eyed intensity. But her story goes far deeper than the image suggests. She is one of those rare artists whose music feels carved from the bone, shaped by real struggle, real heartbreak, and a determination to survive the moments that could have destroyed her. Her journey began with extraordinary promise. Signed to a record deal in her teens, Jaime quickly earned a reputation as one of Los Angeles' most gifted young voices. She had the tone, the writing talent, and the spark of an artist who could cross boundaries with ease. But life had a different path in store. Fame didn't come smoothly. Instead, she fell into addiction and destructive patterns that eventually led to a short prison sentence, something almost unheard of in the country music world. Many artists never recover from that kind of fall. Jaime did something harder. She rebuilt herself from the ashes. When she came back to music, it wasn't with polished reinvention or a carefully curated redemption arc. It was with brutal honesty. Her songs weren't crafted to disguise her scars. They put them on full display. The pain, the guilt, the regret, the resilience, it was all there, raw and trembling, yet fiercely alive. And then came her defining moment, the 2020 album Neon Cross. Produced by Shooter Jennings, the album was a revelation. Jaime didn't just sing about the darkness, she confronted it, she illuminated it, she turned it into something powerful and unforgettable. Critics praised the album as one of the most emotionally devastating and truthful works in modern outlaw country. In that same season of self-reckoning, Jaime publicly came out as gay. It wasn't framed as a dramatic confession. It wasn't treated as a headline. It was simply her truth, one of many threads woven into the fabric of her life and art. She spoke openly about how the fear of hiding her identity had contributed to her struggles, and how embracing it became part of her healing. Today, Jaime Wyatt stands as one of the genre's most respected and compelling voices. She doesn't rely on shock value, trend-chasing, or polished narratives. She gives listeners something far rarer: the truth, unvarnished. A reminder that beauty often lives in the places we're taught to hide. Her music proves something essential about country music itself. At its core, it's not about perfection. It's about redemption. It's about finding hope in broken places. And Jaime Wyatt embodies that spirit more honestly than most artists ever will.